name's Stefanchin. I'm really happy to be here today. This is my third time working with Georgie and the folks at Inspired. I love the conference, love the setting and the topics. So happy this morning to lead a panel around the idea of employee well-being and the impact that it has on organizations. So my work at Panasonic, leading talent, learning, and OD, really focuses in on this idea of, mental health, well-being, and the impact that it has not only on our employees, but on the organization itself. So this morning, we've got a great panel to talk about some of the real issues at work. We're gonna mix it up a little this morning. We'll do a question, open it up to the panel, but then we'll open it up for a conversation from the group. Normally with these, we run out of time at the end and there's no time for questions. So we're gonna play with it a little bit and have some dialogue and an open sort of conversation back and forth. So on that, why don't we just real quick, if we can, introduce yourselves and we'll jump in.
Hi everybody, my name is Fatima Aziz. I'm the Chief People and Development Officer for the Soho House North America teams. Previously to that, I was with NBC Universal for about 10 years. So at NBC, I was in a breaking news environment. At Soho House, it's hospitality, so you put it all together there, as far as how stressful it can be.
Huge fan.
Yes.
You got your cheering
I got my
section
cheering
over here.
cheering squad. Thank you.
I'm Kristen Cury. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Clarence Group USA. We are a skincare, cosmetics, and fragrance company. And I do pretty much a very generalist role supporting the US.
And I'm Vivien Page. If you drank sparkling ice, that's us from Talking Rain. And I'm the head of HR and technology.
Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Henriquez and I'm the Director of Talent Development at Capsule. You may have seen our ads on the subway at some point. We're a healthcare tech company looking to make a pharmacy system that works for everybody.
Fantastic. So we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna jump right in. And the first thing when we start talking about well-being in the workplace, like a lot of other things, especially in HR, it's how do we define it, right? What is it? I think it means something different to everyone. So as a panel, we'll go ahead and just kind of talk about what it means to you and your organization, and we'll open it up. So.
Sure. I mean, I think you can kind of define it in multiple ways. For some of the organizations that I've been with, it's been about the physical as well as the mental kind of state of your employee, and I think so much can kind of be added to that. So just with the Soho House alone, on the physical side, we've really taken fitness pretty seriously. We try to create that a really kind of group environment. We encourage people to work out together. We've got our executives that are involved as well. We'll have our CLO at the front of a boxing session, and what that does is just relieve a little bit of the stress that you kind of deal with on the day-to-day basis. But on the mental side, we've really taken that into account when it comes to mental health awareness, just in general. We obviously have EAP. I know everyone probably utilizes some sort of employee assistance type program, but we encourage it. And we actually, in some of the organizations I've been with, we've made the sessions free for employees too, so that they know that you've got 10 free sessions with a therapist in the event you needed to kind of utilize it. And lo and behold, people are using it. I mean, obviously we don't have a way of officially tracking it because that's private information, but we know that people are using it. And then it also just comes to, we realize that it's the responsibility of the management team to understand where the stress levels of your team are. When I was in a breaking news environment, the content that people were working on is stressful. People are dying, people are, there's a lot of issues at hand. And so to the degree that we brought in comfort dogs at one point to make people feel better and make sure that people aren't allergic to it, by the way, because that was the other thing we didn't consider when we brought the dogs in. But people actually really value the extra efforts of an organization to kind of ask, hey, what do you guys like to do? What would relieve some of the stress that you kind of have on your hands right now? And I think just really looking at what the job is that they're doing and what kind of level of stress that could actually bring as well.
We definitely, when I started at Clarence, we were really more focused on like the health and well-being aspect of it, and we worked very closely with, we have Cigna for our insurance, so we were doing a lot of programs with them. But one of the things that we actually did over the past year or two, we actually started looking past just the health and wellness of our employee, which obviously is very important, but there's also a lot of outside, stressors in people's lives. So we started also looking at like our employees' financial well-being. We started offering them additional life insurance options. We had a RetireWise program where we had outside vendors members come in, that we're really trying to help set people up and make sure they had the information, you know, to secure their futures, because that's a big piece of, you know, your life. It's why most of us are working, let's be honest. So to really make sure that our employees had those tools, and we were, you know, doing it for, you know, if you were in your 20s, if you were in your 30s, 40s, 50s, to make sure that obviously the needs of the 20-something-year-old right out of college versus someone who's maybe in their 40s or 50s and really starting to think about retirement, they're going to be very different. So we're making sure that we were gearing all of our programs towards specific ages to make sure that they had the tools. So that was something that we've gotten tremendous feedback on, just outside of the health and wellness aspect of it too.
We're in the Seattle area, and we have made it our long-term strategy to become a premier employer. So when we're looking at the strategy in itself, what does that mean? The first thing that we decided is we have to look at our rainmakers. The name of our company is Talking Rain. Not only as an intricate part of the culture, but as a 24/7 person, right? Normally companies, if you remember in the past in HR, it was as long as you're here 8 to 5 and you're in your best shape in 8 to 5, we don't care what you're doing outside. We decided to look at the Rainmaker as a 24/7. What can we do for this person to have the best 5 to midnight or 5 a.m. in order to be the best possible from here to 8 to 5 and really be happy? And then, you know, what is the environment here so that they actually not, you know, live and have a happy time during the home and are not stressed at home because of work. So we have the health side, we have the work side, but more than anything, it was a culture focus in having an outward mindset, and that meaning, do I have this person's best interest in mind in every decision that I make? So the leadership, you know, has kind of trickled all of that culture part into looking at a person. What is your state of mind right now? Tell me, you know, we actually have like a scale of 1 to 10. Tell me how are you today in business and in person, and I will treat you that way. We provide gym with trainers. We try to educate in food and actually bring food that is healthy. Our policy is actually if we provide something, it's on the healthy side. You can make the other choices.
I think one of the things that stands out to me and about thinking about well-being is really thinking about, you know, how your companies define well-being differently. And one of the things that I think is really important is you really need to think about where you are as a company and what you're capable of doing. Right now we only have 300 employees, all based in New York. So thinking about you as a company and your growth stage, and then also thinking about how does your well-being strategy or what you're thinking about well-being match with your mission, values, and objectives. And so at Capsule, one of our values is everybody needs looking after sometime, and that's the value that we think about for both our external consumers and our internal employees. And so the way that manifests itself in how we're starting to think about well-being programs and creating larger initiatives is thinking about how are we enabling one another to do their best work. And so for us right now, we're really thinking about it in terms of we have operating principles of, you know, how do we think about work? How do we give feedback? How do we you know, make sure that we're thinking through how do we send emails that are going to be helpful to one another, as well as thinking about, you know, just the foundational things of making sure that we're offering really great healthcare benefits to all of our salaried and hourly employees, maternity, paternity leave. So that's where we are right now.
Fantastic. So I heard a lot of things that will actually tie into some of the other questions we have. You were mentioning healthy choices. I was at Google recently. I don't know if anyone's ever had a chance to go to their campus, but they have over 350 micro kitchens on campus, and anything you possibly want, fruit, nuts, cakes, candies, but you have to bend over and get down to the bottom drawers for the unhealthy choices. So they've even thought of placement for the unhealthy choices. So that reminded me of that.
Yeah, and also the location, right? We have fruit, water, etc. within, you know, short distance, so people don't have to like either sit there and be hungry or eventually go so hungry that they overeat, right? Yeah, so it's being, you know, you find trays in our conference rooms with fruit, Obviously, we're a beverage company, so you can drink as much as you, as you want there. But it's been very helpful for the employees.
Fantastic. So what do we think? Does anyone have a challenge with defining wellness in your own organization, or do you have any questions for the folks here on how they differentiate between perhaps programs or the definition itself?
Oh, question for you. Yeah, I know, because we, about 2 years ago, my CEO went into on the financial component, and you know, we really need to ensure that people are definitely thinking about their future while taken care of and how these resources. How impactful, I mean, did you get a lot of people, so setting up, you know, these, you know, meetings and, you know, promoting it, having people come in, did you find that there was a lot of, you know, a good response for our industry, housekeeping, engineering, backgrounds, kitchen, things of that nature, so we were hoping to get that target, didn't really get as much, so I wanted to see what type of success stories or what tricks that you were able to get
Yeah,
people
so when we
to
rolled
attend.
out the Retire Wise program, it was a 4-week program. It was, we tried to schedule it during lunchtime, so, you know, people didn't feel like they were really cutting into their day. We had a max capacity to be able to attend. It was the first time we did it of 25. We hit 25 people like that. And then there were some people that wanted to do it, that the 2 gentlemen who ran it for us actually did like one-on-one consultations with people outside of it. They were really great about doing follow-up, so we got tremendous results from it. We've been able to kind of follow up with some of those things. It was an outside company that we used for that. So since then, we've really been able to follow up with different options, from like our 401k vendor to continue promoting through you know, their webinars, their educational materials. Our big focus that we've always really struggled with in terms of financial well-being, we have a big distribution center in Rockland County, and we have about 120 employees there, and primarily a Spanish-speaking population. So we've really gone out of our way to be able to find people through our vendors that are bilingual that can come in and we'll speak directly to them. You know, it's an hourly population. They're not making that much. So for them, you know, most of them unfortunately do live paycheck to paycheck, and really helping to put strategies into place for them was huge for us. And we, you know, whether you want to say it was successful or not, I mean, our enrollments did go up for them. So, you know, you take what you can and continue to feed it to them. So that was definitely, we, in our minds, successful, and we'll continue to work on that.
Anyone else? So maybe we take that and segue into the next one, which is really about the idea of measuring the effectiveness. And so most things we do in HR, you know, the question comes up sooner or later, you know, what's the return on investment here? So when we're dealing with such personal issues as mental health, physical health, how do you measure it when a lot of these things are protected? So any ideas or stories to share on how you can measure the effectiveness of programs?
Over at Soho House, actually, and we're a hospitality and hotel and restaurant brand, we actually made a point to make up one of our benefits packages is free. So people have an option to choose it. It's a little bit more on the basic side. And when we looked at the utilization report, which is something that is available to us, we noticed that people were actually opting for the more expensive route. So people are valuing some of the more options that we have in place, which is great to see. But that also kind of, it tweaks the way when we look at 2020, we start to see, okay, people are utilizing certain areas a little bit more than others. People are willing to pay more for a better benefits package. And so that's some of the things. But really, it's about asking the employee directly. I think some organizations use surveys, obviously, to get a gauge of where their employees are at. Some don't. I think the direct focus groups that we've been able to do over at Soho House have been pretty effective as well. And it's just talking to people directly, but at all levels, hourly level, all the way to the senior management. And then we found that we needed to create tiers of some kind for different levels to make it more competitive for people to want to join our organization. So.
One of the things that we did when I started under our kind of wellness program, we actually offer wellness compliance or non-wellness compliance. And initially it was you had to have, we had on-site biometric screenings, and then you also had to complete the health risk assessment that was on the Cigna website. And if you complied with that for you, and also if you had a spouse or domestic partner on the plan, they had to comply as well. And we found that, you know, people were doing it, but we were still seeing that our our medical costs were going up year over year, as I'm sure most of you see. So what we did about 3 years ago, we actually changed from having the biometric screenings to you had to go and actually go to your GP and have a full physical, and they had to sign off on a form and then also do the health risk assessment. And we've actually found that over the past 2 to 3 years, our medical costs have actually stayed very much in line, and they've actually stayed below what Cigna was projecting our increases would be at. So we found that it's been great, and for us, it was really just about encouraging our employees. You need to have a relationship with your general practitioner. And then Cigna's been really great about working on, when they obviously see all the results that come in, and being able to kind of target people for specific programs like a pre-diabetic program or high cholesterol, high blood pressure, things like that, that they can kind of target outside of us. And we've found that we've gotten tremendous results from that.
So we kind of took the same approach about a few years ago of requiring, we have 2 tiers in terms of health insurance choices, right? One, the employee, in order to get 100% paid, they must have a physical they do every year. We don't need to know what the result of the physical is. We just need to know that you went. If you didn't go, then there's a premium that you have to pay. And it's actually minimum $20, and it's very effective on having the employees go take the physical, and we've saved a few lives. People that were, one person that had no idea had skin cancer that had progressed quite a bit, and another one with lung cancer. So it's been very rewarding in that sense. That something that was a little bit of resistance at the beginning. It's like, why are you making us do this? Was helpful for them. The other thing that we do is we do use Waggle, which is kind of like a pulse engagement tool where you can deploy 5 questions, and then the employees kind of choose what thing you have to give priority to. And so through Waggle, we measure our engagement constantly. And so I want to say it's not necessarily 100% tied to well-being, but often questions are related to well-being, and then we know if something is working or not, but we don't have in-depth tied to ROI for that. Other than, if you prove that engagement provides a 22% return to their bottom line. So if you can manage that, I think you're good.
One of the challenges when you're growing these initiatives and well-being initiatives from the ground up, especially in growing organizations, which is my niche and where I've worked, I think one of the difficulties is trying to prove ROI and the reason why we should be working on something. And one of the things that has been really successful for me has been piloting programs with small groups of employees, and almost taking the L&D Kirkpatrick model of measuring initiatives, of starting off with just reactions. So figuring out, how do the employees who we put in this pilot or exposed to this initiative to, how do they feel about it? What do they think? How does that match what we originally thought? And then being able to grow it a little bit more and think about, okay, is this really impacting their behavior? How has manager relationships improved? Whatever the case, whatever the initiative is focusing on. But I think that we sometimes tend to forget that, just trying something with a small group of people and getting those very, simple seeming metrics that tends to put people off and completely decide not to follow through with something. And so I think it's important to remember that, a reactionary survey can have a lot of weight in thinking about, is this something that we should continue to move forward with?
I love that idea of pilots, and it's the whole learning organization, fail fast, fail forward. And I think it's probably a little easier in smaller organizations,
yes,
as Alicia and I have talked about. I'm going to go off script for a second, because as I was listening, I was wondering, are you seeing an increase in job seekers or candidates asking about wellness programs?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for us, it's a big attractor to the culture, right? Where if you are in good health, you probably are gonna be able to deliver a lot more. And so part of our, we have a gym, we have trainers that come in, we have certainly value a lot of mental health and openly speak about mental health. And a lot of it, leadership team people kind of provide the example or the role modeling of the fact that we all have therapists, you know, and if you have a good therapist, you're probably good at work. In addition to that, our health insurance provides 100% coverage on therapy, and we also have an EAP that provides the opportunity for you to select a therapy or get some initial help. We certainly push that out. But I would say those things are an attractor, like a differentiator now, at least in our area. I don't know, New York is a little bit more advanced in everything, but we're in the Seattle area, which we are advanced in a way, you know. And we compete with companies that have a lot of money, right? So if you think about the return on investment in a bottle of water versus a piece of software from Amazon or Microsoft, but that's what gives us the edge, is giving the ability to find an environment where it's more about you being your best, not necessarily you competing at your best with the next person.
To shift a little bit about from that is the sense of belonging that I think a lot of people want to feel in an organization. So one of the things that we were struggling with is getting more female chefs in our organization. And doing some research, we realized that a lot of female candidates want to know what the organization stands for and what are some of the values, and do we do diversity type initiatives, do we do women's initiatives themselves. And so once we did that research, we realized if we create more of those programs internally, we're going to attract more female candidates into the organization as well as diverse candidates. And so it's really diversity and inclusion, that whole initiative, it's really becoming part of our ethos. And it helps a lot with that, again, the belonging, the stress that comes with an organization, having other people you can kind of relate to and talk to. So I think that adds a lot to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. Anyone have any questions around measuring these types of programs?
We talked a little bit about kind of a hard measurement and briefly about more soft. I'm working on employee experience, and one of the things we're trying to do more and more is sentiment analysis. It goes a little bit to that topic of well-being, because there are some things that our employees want to talk often, talk about mental health. So I was wondering if you've implemented anything around sentiment analysis, or the tool that you mentioned, which I think was demoed last year at the same conference, is very interesting. But you know, I always, when I talk to my boss, I always push the idea of this button you have in the airport for the bathroom where you put the smiley faces. We have 8,000 consultants working around the world, and we want to find how they feel. Outside of the employee surveys and twice a year, that's great, blah, blah, blah. But how do they really feel? So what have you guys been doing?
Well, talking really has become a practice now, where you start the conversation by saying that, what are you today? An 8, a 7, and you can differentiate between, you can be an 8 because your work is going really well, but life is really crappy. Excuse me. And you know, maybe an 8 and a 2, and you don't have to elaborate unless you want to, right? As a manager, it gives you an opportunity to say, well, is there anything I can do for you? Or maybe that day you're not so rough on them in terms of the deadlines, etc. But it also, so it's not just in the one-on-one, it's also in meetings, right? So if you have 10 people, obviously you're not going to be able to do that in a huge meeting, but if you have meetings of 10, 15 people, we actually put our names there and kind of write our number at the day. Initially, it was an interesting experience because we had people, when we introduced the concept, saying 8, and then eventually when they realized that the leadership was saying 6 or 5, then we had some people say, well, I'm going to downgrade my number. I thought I had to say that in order to fit in, right? And so it's become real.
It's very important. Because, like, my global CHRO started to send me emails where it was asking, how do you feel? And he would tell me how he feels. And he would tell me I feel too because my wife has a cancer and I had to drive her 3 times last week at the hospital. And I'm like, oh, is my global CHRO just telling me about his personal life and sharing what is in his mind? I I guess I can do the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what
It's,
you did
it's
is,
humanity,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you're actually finally stopping to objectivize the people and just looking at,
but I feel
we
it's-
all have these lives that are outside.
It's a change, like it's not
Uh-huh.
something, I'm not from HR originally, but that's not something I felt before. You know, being able to talk about things and not just being, you know, a standard HR or standard employee, but you're always going to say, I'm very happy in my job. No, my job sucks.
Yeah.
Let's work on it together.
So
Yeah, exactly.
our CEO actually travels the country and the world actually and has meetings that are called frustration meetings. And so he's like, come with your frustrations. And when I first joined the organization, I was like, oh no, what am I gonna see in this room? But he kind of picks out the managers of the people in the room and they come with their list of concerns. Now, I think, you know, you balance how you want to call the meeting and how you want to run the meeting, but we got a lot of feedback and we got the direct feedback of what we need to do. Now he gave HR 7 days to resolve them, and we were like, we probably so there's some tweaks to it, but it was kind of refreshing to have someone just say, what are you pissed off about right now? And people came clean with it. So
I think the most important part when you're thinking about, you know, asking those questions around, you know, how do you feel today and all of that, the most important piece is psychological safety, which there's a lot of literature out about, and I think is super important because at the end of the day, if someone doesn't feel like they can bring their whole selves to work and say, hey, I'm really struggling with my partner's, you know, illness right now, you know, then if you don't know that, if they're not able to say that, or if they're not able to say, hey CEO, like this is what's really like grinding my gears right now, then you're never going to be able to get to the next level of their productivity and then also what you're capable of as an organization. And so I think the first piece is thinking about what is your organization doing to foster the psychological safety that can then take you to making sure that when they are filling out those surveys, when they are going to these breakfasts and conversations, that they're actually saying what they truly feel.
Yeah.
I want to say part of what we also do, we started this initiative about 3 years ago, and interestingly, there's technology now that you can go and click on the little faces, by the way, that is coming into the workforce for performance management. But what I was going to say in terms of these meetings that we run, we started 3 years ago. We call them self-leadership meetings because eventually the ideal situation is that you can manage yourself. There's no one to manage you, right? But part of those meetings, you can create a lot of connectivity of the same group that meets every other week. And as a result, there's a lot of personal things that come out. So we actually have a policy of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, you know, if something is said there, it doesn't go out of that room. If something gets said in the one-to-one personal thing, it's expected that you're gonna keep that as the story of the other person. And it's amazing that over 3 years, I have not had one complaint coming to HR, I said this and they got out. You know, it's really fantastic. A lot of connection also with those groups that have been together for a while.
Yeah, as I was listening, I was thinking of psychological safety as well, and I do a lot of work with that at Panasonic with the senior leaders, and it's about the idea of being vulnerable, right? And if a leader can't put him or herself out there to be vulnerable, the employees see through it. You know, years ago, I used to say, fake it until you make it. People today are smarter. They see right through the faking. So you really have to be sincere. And I do a lot of coaching in that space. It's hard.
I think everybody's been faking it for so long.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of experts at faking it so they can see what everybody else. So I have it's kind of an observation, it's kind of a question. You know, I found it interesting, you were talking earlier about you offer free benefits. And people are, you know, it's an option, that sounds awesome, but people still choose to go the other route. So Gen Z started entering the workforce fairly recently. I don't know if we have enough data to really support any conclusions at this point, but what I'm starting to recognize is young people fresh out of school coming into the workforce where we are, in the past, when in onboarding, they would pretty much ignore or not pay attention to anything about benefits or 401k. It was like in one ear, out the other, and let's talk about things that I care about. But now they seem to be really keying in on benefits, the healthcare packages, and diversity and inclusion.
yeah.
And it seems to be what they're paying attention to the most, or asking questions about the most. And even just recently, we onboarded a large number of people in our tax department, and they were asking questions about healthcare coverage and therapy. So it seemed, I don't know, it's all kind of a new trend. I don't know if everybody else is, I see it not.
We did the psychological safety and all, and it took a great weight of HR. So we started clubs. You know, and instead of us doing there's this activity, come to this activity, we're like, who wants to head the wine club? Who wants to head the beer club? You know, who wants to head the running club? And now we have like 15, 16 clubs, people meet, we you know, if you're starting a running club, we'll provide the t-shirts, you know, and these people that decide, you know, they have a passion for that, they feel like they're making an impact in other people's lives.
Right.
We don't have to organize the run, you know, we really just give them the money. They look at everything for that. Then the other thing that I was going to tie to is that you mentioned the Generation Z coming into place. And I would say the part that they have grown up with technology, right? That's the differentiator. And so they're instantly educating themselves. Versus the previous generations were kind of waited a little to have someone give them guidance or maybe have the problem and then face it. They're actually more preemptive, right? And so that's probably why they're kind of coming and asking all those questions right from the get-go, especially given what they've seen their parents go through.
Can I ask a quick question about the well-being, right? I mean, it's fantastic, everything that you mentioned before, but have you ever been in a situation where you need, as an HR professional, needs to balance out between employees' well-being and also performance, in the sense of the well-being of employees could impact their performance, and it creates traction between HR and the management team, where the management team focus mostly is about performance of the team, revenue, hit target, achieving certain expectations, but at the same token, the employees dealing with all these well-being. Have you ever been in a situation where you have to balance that out constantly?
So I think it's a challenge, right? Your management has to buy into the initiative in order for it to be part of the culture. But I would say once they are, you really realize the performance comes off because your employees are in a well mindset. How about you guys?
I actually encourage everybody to Google an article called Radical Candor. I don't know if anyone's kind of read it before, but it's actually an interesting balance of giving very direct feedback as well as caring about the person personally. So if you kind of balance those two things out, the employee knows what you want from them. They get a very clear sense of the goals and expectations set for them, which I think is, I hope, not a step that people miss, but sometimes we do miss, of just like goal set. Beginning of the year, here's what my expectations are. I'm going to checkpoint along the way. And then just giving them the direct feedback. I don't think people like living in the unknown and saying, I don't know how I'm doing right now, if you tell me exactly how you feel. But then, God forbid something's going on at home, if your manager says, hey, I know you have a lot on your plate at home right now, you know, take the rest of the afternoon off, but let's talk in the morning about some of the things that we need you to get done. I mean, you're sort of balancing that out, and I think at the end of the day, the employee appreciates it. So
Radical Candor is actually a book.
Yes.
I recommend
Yeah.
it. Also, I think 2 or 3 months ago, the Harvard Business Review had another huge article in terms of feedback. But I would also add that performance actually is tied to consistent communication, right? And so is your team having consistent one-on-ones? Are those one-on-ones, you know, clear out at the end of the day and saying, this is what we discussed. 1, you have to get better at this, and you have this many days, right? So I feel like clarity provides the psychological safety. This is where you stand, and you know it all the time, but it also provides the more connectivity with your manager. You have my best interest in mind, therefore you're telling me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. Yeah.
So this was my big question, because you said performance is tied to regular communication. I would say, I'll speak for our firm, performance is supposed to be about regular communication. And this is our classic issue, where most of the time it's a one-time-a-year conversation. And as much as we preach or try to inform or teach or whatever the importance of regular communication, it's just not happening. So this is our struggle. This is what I'm trying to figure out. And so for me, I mean, all this stuff is important, but the well-being, of our employees, most of the time, their biggest complaint is we don't get regular communication. So I'm not sure how to get there.
I think,
So-
go ahead, please.
sorry.
We're also eager to be room.
Yeah.
So I think the level, I feel like we forget about is that management level. And obviously, one of the reasons is because there's a discomfort with giving tough feedback. It's not easy, you don't want to hurt people's feelings, it's sometimes just hard yourself. I think we need to invest in the training that at that level, how do you give impactful feedback? Run through scenarios, go through real life scenarios, take a situation with that manager that they didn't do a good job with that, and walk through step by step. And I think it's the repetition that makes people comfortable, and then it's sort of second nature when it comes to, I mean, it's mind-boggling for all of us to think that someone will only tell someone how they're doing at the end of the year, and then from a legality point of view, and you have to terminate that person, it's like, I never was told I wasn't doing well, right? Like, how many times have we heard that? So the consistent feedback and the documentation of it, I mean, I think that's all part of the training, but I don't think we should forget about that level. I think it's the repetitive training that we have to do at that.
We do, so we kind of eliminated the once a year thing, and so we do the once a week thing. We require all managers to meet with their direct reports once a week. We also have trimester, we call it KOEs, key objectives and expectations. Some other people call it KOR, AOR, I think. And that is very clear what goals you need to specifically meet during that meeting. We kind of tie that to our culture. We call it the rain dance. And so every trimester, you for sure are going to have a conversation with your manager as to what goals did you complete or not complete, so it provides a lot of clarity. But we also do the training for feedback, not just with managers, we do it with everybody, because it is convenient for you to get the best possible feedback. We call it GB square, getting better. And so we teach them how to ask the question. How to ask the question, right? So you initiate it. If it's tough for the manager to give it to you, then you initiate the question because it is most convenient for you. And this is I told you that we're trying to become an employer of choice, and part of that is being able to have the best feedback for yourself, right? You are self-led, so I'm gonna go seek the feedback rather than wait for my manager to tell me what's difficult. The other thing for ladies, right? Ladies don't get as clear feedback as men do because they don't know how to ask the question, right? They usually say, how am I doing? Oh, you're doing just fine. Well, the man is like, what can I do? And then they get clarity. And so we do a little extra with the ladies as to tell me what I don't want to hear. What is the conversation that I don't want to have with you? Force yourself, if I have a problem and it's with you and I don't want to talk to you, force yourself to have that conversation.
So in the interest of time, this is a really good conversation, and in the course of the last 10 minutes or so, we've touched on 3 of the questions we didn't get to in terms of how do you close the gap between a strategic priority and what people actually want. So I hear a lot of listening to the employees, or benchmarking research, listening to employees. You know, then there's the last one, whose responsibility is it? I think that's kind of where we are right now. So maybe in closing, and we'll open up for some final questions, but how do you move it from an HR initiative to a mindset of the organization in its culture and its fabric?
I can tell you, at least for us and my company, everything is HR's responsibility. Every single thing. And we've definitely been trying to push back on that a little bit. And it's, you know, even just, we've been hearing so much about, you know, our promotions and how do I get promoted and how do I advance in this company? And it's pushing back on the employee too, that it's not just your manager's responsibility. You as an employee have to own your career path. And if your manager doesn't know that you want to be them one day, or that you want to have, you know, people underneath you, that's your fault. You need to own that too. And we're definitely trying to give a little bit more on here's how you take ownership of your own career and the direction that you want to go in. And we're training not just the employee on how to have those conversations, but also the manager then on how to respond to those situations. So, you know, we're trying to definitely push back and give people more of the tools that they need to take ownership. But for right now, that's definitely, I'll be honest, that's a struggle with us because it's everything, oh, HR will take care of it, just call HR.
I think for us, it really truly does stem from our CEO and our founders, and that they created a culture and a culture manifesto that really articulates what we believe in, our values, how we put them in action. And I think the important piece is making sure that it doesn't live just with them. To your point, thinking about, okay, well, how do you also make sure that all employees take on that responsibility? And so what we've been doing is, in our new orientation program, we have on the checklist of what every single new employee needs to do is they need to make sure that with their manager, they go over their goals and expectations. They need to make sure that with their manager, they are scheduling one-on-ones. I actually just had a conversation with one of our customer experience representatives where she said, hey, my manager hasn't scheduled my one-on-one, I've been here for a month, like, should I wait for them to do it? And I said, nope, remember on the list it says that you need to reach out to them, and they know that that's the expectation. Because they're really busy and things come up. And so I think it's figuring out how are you communicating everything that you want your employees, your organization to do, and also putting the ownership on every single person at all different levels.
So we decided to manage it more from the senior, so the responsibility falls on the senior managers, and that's not the executives. So we have senior managers, directors, VPs, execs, and the whole idea is the execs are out there to look at what's in the future and what's coming and prepare for that. It's the job of the senior managers to actually deploy the stuff and work it through the day, right? And so we work in HR, our closest people that we work with is those senior managers, because they're the ones that are managing the day-to-day. And it actually, instead of us being 14, now we have so many more people. We really drive down the values with them. We really push everything that is related to what we want them to accomplish in terms of those areas and communication through the senior managers. But I have to say, a huge part of being successful is whoever owns you and whoever is at the top. If they're not living those principles,
We're done. No, it's technology. Get the best of me.
If they're not living it, it's very difficult. We're privately held, so the owners kind of somewhat participate in what they want, but the CEO really is the one that sets the tone.
So kind of a common theme with a lot of the things we do, right? Setting the tone at the top,
Yeah.
and we expect people to own it, just like careers these days. Own your career, own your wellness. But we have to provide tools, I think, for everyone. I hear a lot of onus on mid-management.
Yeah.
Very often, though, mid-level management, they're overworked. Spans of control of up to 14 in manufacturing, 1 in 14. How do you have time to focus on each individual's wellness and their goals and their development? We have to get better, I think, in providing tools for everyone to help themselves and to help others. Any last questions? Because we actually are out of time.
This may go in a slightly different direction. My colleague Brian and I work in the accounting profession, and we have peak busy seasons, months at a time, where our folks are working 60 to 70 hours a week, 6 days a week. We asked them what they do on the one day off, and it was laundry, catch them on sleep. So my question is, we call them busy season benefits. They're not 12 months benefits, but what gets you over the hump? And the number one thing in the accounting profession is a laundry stint.
Wow.
Number two was coming in and having 20-minute massages in the office.
Nice.
So this is not year long, and to your point, you went from busy season benefits to the firms that have done it becomes ingrained. I know it's kind of on the spot, but any ideas?
Well, first of all, I'm stealing that idea. So
Okay.
you guys taking notes? Okay,
Good
good.
idea.
No, I think everyone has busy season. I think everyone has seasonal times where we can utilize something like that. I don't actually have ideas right now off the top of my head.
We don't do anything.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, everyone has a season, but I would say for us, we just kind of decided to focus on the employee experience, right? And from the first moment that we made the touch in the recruiting process to, their time with the organization. So not just knowing how they are, but we actually send them birthday gifts, we send them anniversary cards. We make sure that they're there thinking that we're thinking of them, and they actually respond in a super positive way, and always saying that they love to work for them.
I mean, feeding people is always good. We have something called Family Meal, and it's a huge success for us. But yeah, I mean, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, it's
Busy
really-
season benefits, love it.
Yeah, and the laundry stipend was,
Yeah,
and
huge.
for those folks, like New York's a little different animal.
Yeah.
If you're in the Midwest or whatever, the firms would
Yeah.
contact cleaning services, rather. And they
Right.
would show up at the office, so you drive in, you have your laundry bag, and they do it
Wow.
and drop it off at the end of the day.
Great. Wow.
Love it.